Hello everyone, and welcome to the Synology product online training. We have a great topic for everyone here today, going over identity and access management with Synology's C2 identity. Quick introduction, my name's Cody. I'm a product manager here at Synology, and I'll be your guide for this one this time around. As mentioned, the main topic of today is going to be on C2 identity, and to explore this topic, we're going to be following through the quick start guide for this platform that you can find on our Knowledge Center online. Now keep in mind, this is going to be setting up some foundational knowledge regarding C2 identity for this Synology community. And your organization may need a different combination of integrations with other cloud platforms, for example. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to us. We'd love to help you out and architect how best to set up C2 identity for your environment. But the main goals of today is to explore C2 identity as an identity and access management platform. And we're going to be looking to manage user accounts, devices, as well as integrate cloud and on-premise components. On the agenda today, we're going to start off with a first-time setup with C2 identity, getting your domain configured and setting up your C2 encryption key. We're then going to take a look at managing users, either creating them manually using the wizard or importing them via a CSV file. We're then going to take a look at how you can manage your devices, your Windows PCs and servers using C2 identity. And finally, we're going to look at the cloud integrations with C2 identity, particularly with Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. Although you can integrate with other cloud platforms that support SAML 2 and third-party identity providers. And lastly, we're going to take a look at the bundled service with C2 Identity Business, and that is C2 Password for Business. Moving on into Section 1, first-time setup for C2 Identity. To begin with C2 Identity, we're going to start off by signing into C2 with your Synology account. All your subscriptions for C2 are tied to your Synology account, so that's going to be how you sign in the first time to get things configured. You'll also want to then choose what plan you want to utilize for C2 Identity. Most businesses are going to want to use the business plan, and you can choose whether to be billed monthly or annually, and that can be changed at a later time. You then want to set up your domain for C2 Identity. This is going to be something you want to sort of apply to your organization. Maybe you can reflect the name of your organization or some project that you're building the C2 Identity domain for example. And lastly, we're going to choose your encryption key. Now, this is going to be the encryption key for C2 services. And with C2 identity specifically, your encryption key is going to actually be what handles the encryption and decryption of NTLM hashed passwords. So with that all being said, let's go through actually setting up C2 identity for the first time. So here we are on C2 identity, and we're going to get started setting things up for the first time. So to do so, we're going to click that button, Get Started, at the very bottom of the screen. And we're going to agree to the terms of service for C2. Next, we're going to choose what plans we want to utilize with C2 Identity, either the free plan or the business plan. The free plan works for services like C2 Backup, but the business plan is for businesses, so we're going to select that in this case. You can choose a monthly or annual payment plan for this subscription and select how many licenses you need. On this next screen, we're going to set up the domain name for our environment. We're going to just name this one Spot, although you could make this descriptive of your organization, for example. And you can see some other details listed at the bottom for things like the C2 Identity portal and the user principal name. Those details can be grabbed from other menus later on if you don't copy and paste them here. On the next page, we're going to choose how you actually want to pay for the subscription. You're going to set up your payment information, and you can add a payment method right there. But you'll notice that we do have a 30-day trial for this instance, so you can actually set up your payment plan later if you wanted to just try this out, for example. So we're going to finish setting up this whole wizard here. And we're going to choose the United States of America. And of course, you can select what you want your invoice to be titled and some different addresses for this environment and what city you expect this environment to be sort of based out of. Now, on the next page, we're going to actually be able to decrypt our data. If you hadn't already set up a C2 encryption key, this is where you would do so. But at this point, C2 identity is basically ready for interaction and for setup for your greater organization. Moving on into Section 2, Managing User Accounts. So on the agenda for this section, Managing Users in C2 Identity, you essentially have three options. You'll be able to add user accounts manually using the wizard or through import via a CSV file. You could also sync directories that may already be in place. That could be Windows Active Directory that is already in place in your environment, or a Synology LDAP server, for example. Or you can do a one-time migration out of those Active Directory environments, out of those LDAP environments, or out of Azure AD and Google Workspace. So to get users into C2 Identity, if you haven't done a directory sync or an integration with a third-party platform like Microsoft 365, you're going to want to create users manually in the wizard in the web browser, or you're going to want to import your users via CSV file. Now, the CSV import allows you to import users en masse, or you can batch edit your users en masse using this feature. And this CSV import operation is going to be a similar theme throughout today. If you do one-time migrations out of other directory platforms like Active Directory, for example, the operation is going to be exporting a CSV file for import into C2 Identity once again. So let's check out getting C2 Identity users created and imported into your environment. Back on C2 Identity, we're going to get to adding in users for the first time. To begin, we're going to start adding users in manually using this button at the bottom. And we're going to type in any of the fields that have a star, like username, primary email, those are required, and anything else is pretty much optional in this menu. But you can add in a lot of different details for your user, like what department they're a part of in your organization. Now, once you have finished typing all these fields out, you scroll to the bottom to make sure you don't need any additional fields. You can go ahead and click Next. On this next page, we're going to choose how we want to activate this user and assign a license to this user. So you can send an activation email using this drop-down menu here. And there's a couple other options. You can activate later or also specify a password for this user. Now, if you select specify a password for this user, you're going to be able to generate a password or type one in you want here. And you can force that user to change this password after they log in the next time. You can also assign a license to this specific user. And this is the default behavior of C2 Identity, to assign a license to this user by default, although that is toggleable. You can also choose what groups this user is a part of. Since we just set this up for the first time, we only have one, but you can add in more groups if you need to at a later time and apply this user to them. Now, this box at the very top where there's a copy button on the right side of it, this is going to be the information you want to provide to your new C2 Identity users so they can get things set up for the first time. Once this is all done and you hit OK in this menu, your manually created user is ready to go in C2 Identity. Next, let's import users into C2 Identity using import via CSV. Now, this is going to be done with the add button at the top right, and you can choose import users and groups and do from CSV. Keep in mind, this is a foundational procedure. If you wanted to import from Active Directory or another environment, it's also a CSV import. You just downloaded it from Active Directory. In our case, we're actually going to edit from a template in the From CSV menu. So we're going to download that CSV template from us, edit that template, and then re-upload it into this menu. Now, once that template is all selected, there's some other options below this field that are enabled by default, and we're going to leave this as is for our environment. Now, once we hit import, this user is essentially imported into your C2 Identity environment. On this next screen, you're going to get the C2 password portal URL and this user's setup code. They're going to need this to set up their environment for the first time, and you can also send them an email with these details. Now, from the user perspective, they're going to sign into C2 for the first time using their setup code and all the different details you've already provided them. So they're going to type in their setup code here, and then they're going to be prompted to create things like their C2 encryption key. Keep in mind, this C2 encryption key is for just this user. It is separate from the C2 encryption key that you utilize for your main admin account. And this setup code, this recovery code, is also unique to this specific user because anything and everything in C2 is encrypted. So once we have this user all good to go, you'll see our first look at C2 password today. This is this specific user's C2 password account. So if we click on our user and go to manage, we're actually going to set up two-factor authentication for this user and interact with this a little bit later on. So this user will now need to go to security and go to the two-factor authentication card partway down the screen here and click enable. Now we're going to type in this user's password, and this user will now be able to begin this two-factor authentication setup wizard. They're going to scan this verification code here in Secure Sign-In, a Synology app you can get on your iOS or Android devices, and they're going to type in the code here. Now, once that's all set up, almost immediately, this environment is ready to go for this user, and they can now use two-factor authentication to access devices that they have permissions to. And we'll check out that feature a little bit later in a future demo. So syncing with external directories and C2 Identity, this is going to be a common operation if you're an already established organization and you're using a directory service already. Now, if you want to sync an external directory with C2 Identity, there's going to be one agent per integrated directory. For Microsoft's Active Directory, you're going to install this agent on the domain controller, and the sync will be done from there. And for LDAP, for Synology's LDAP server, you're actually going to be installing this agent on a device that is integrated with that LDAP server. So, as you can imagine, there's LDAP and AD agents. So you're going to be able to integrate your already existing on-premise solutions back to Synology C2 Identity. So if you already have a Windows Active Directory environment or a Synology LDAP server, you can get this synced and integrated today. On top of that, this sync does occur in real time. If you make any password changes, those passwords are synced in real time, and there's about a 90-second interval for any permissions changes in the C2 identity environment and any permissions changes that are occurring and synced through this agent. On top of that, doing this allows you to keep your existing on-premise structure. If you already have an on-premise component that you've been relying on for some time, you can just integrate it with this sync task instead of doing a full migration. So let's check out getting AD sync actually enabled in your environment with C2 identity with an on-premise Active Directory server from Microsoft. So we've added users in manually so far, and we've shown you how to import via CSV file so you can import your users en masse if you ever need to. But let's say you already have an environment that is established with Microsoft Active Directory and you want to sync this environment with your C2 identity instance. To do so, you're going to utilize the directory integration option on the left-hand pane here. We're going to choose Integrate Active Directory. Now we're going to download the C2 Identity Sync agent and also grab this connect key using the copy button. We're going to hop over to our main domain controller, install the C2 Identity agent here, and then paste in that connect key to build this relationship. It's that simple on the AD side. So once we log in here, we paste in this connect key, and that's it on the Active Directory side. That's all you need to do. Now all we have to do on the C2 Identity side is approve this connection and apply any permissions you might want to other applications for this user. Now, keep in mind, once we have this all done, there is going to be some sync settings you can enable once you approve this Active Directory that was detected. You can overwrite duplicate users and groups in your environment or assign C2 identity licenses using these checkboxes here. These are both changeable after you set up this sync. Once this is all done, it's going to begin pulling users and groups into your C2 identity environment through that agent connection. And again, you can see that it's all synced. You can see the sync settings options you can change, and you can see some other server information listed here, like the server name and its fully qualified domain name on top of that. Now, as we jump to group and users under user management on the left-hand side, you're going to see some users and groups with a Windows icon next to them. That is indicating that they were synced across the C2 identity agent into C2 identity, showing that you have that full integration with your Active Directory on-premise already all set up. Now we can use your Active Directory users and groups through C2 identity to use any other services and devices that you pair back to C2 identity as well. Your next option for getting pre-existing users out of other directory services is to use a one-time migration feature with C2 identity. This is actually going to be moving data out of that pre-existing environment into C2 identity for its exclusive use, and you're making C2 identity your central identity provider for your organization moving forward. Now, if you're going to do this migration, you can do it via an on-premise device, maybe an Active Directory domain controller or your LDAP server. For Active Directory, you're going to be actually exporting a CSV and importing it, just like we saw previously. Or for LDAP, you're going to be actually providing some of the bind details for your LDAP server to C2 identity so you can move data over that way. With Azure AD and Google Workspace, it's a very similar export of CSV file and import into C2 identity. So let's check out some of these options now. So we've set up users manually, we've done CSV imports, and we've synced an external directory that was already in place. But let's say you want to actually completely move out of a different service or application and into C2 identity purely, and you want to do a one-time migration. It's going to involve a very similar CSV import process that you saw previously, just that CSV data is generated from a different location rather than editing from a template. So in this case, what you would do is go to that same add menu here, and you're going to choose to import users and groups once again, and you're going to choose where you want to import from. In our case, for example today, we're going to actually import from Microsoft 365, and you would pull these users from your Azure users menu here and click this download users button. It would generate a CSV file that you can then import into C2 identity, and those users would now be available inside of C2 identity at that point. Keep in mind, this is a one-time migration. If you wanted to keep full integration with Microsoft 365 and have kind of a constant identity provider relationship, you would actually do the application integration we'll touch on a little bit later in a future demo. In the section 3, managing devices. So in terms of device integration with C2 identity, you're going to have two options, either spinning up an Edge LDAP server or using a C2 identity agent on a machine that it's compatible with. So in terms of the Synology C2 Identity Edge LDAP server, this is going to be the on-premise component of your C2 identity environment and can be installed either on a Synology NAS or inside of a Docker container. This agent is actually going to retrieve data from C2 identity and keeps your directory up to date via secure LDAP communications with the cloud. It also updates C2 identity with information about this Edge LDAP server every 5 minutes. On top of that, you can also authenticate your on-premise services with your C2 identity environment by using this LDAP agent. It also provides offline communication if there is ever a communication issue between your on-premise environment and the cloud environment as a whole. So let's go ahead and check out how to set up your C2 identity edge LDAP server on a Synology NAS. So we've gone over quite a bit looking at how to deal with users, get them imported, migrated, or synced with an external directory. Keep in mind, you're going to use some sort of combination of those different operations to meet your organization's needs. Now in this demo, we're going to actually set up an edge LDAP server. So to do so, we're going to go to the edge server option on the left-hand pane here and essentially follow through with this wizard. For us today, we're actually going to utilize a Synology NAS as our edge LDAP server, although you can run this in Docker if you want to. So we're going to run it on our physical Synology NAS. We're going to install this application from our package center and then also paste in the connect key whenever we're prompted to do so. So we've already got this application installed from Package Center, and we're going to click on this icon here so we can launch the web portal for C2 Identity Edge Server and then configure this NAS there. We're going to choose what display name we want this to have inside of our C2 Identity dashboard, and then you can paste in your connect key here. Now on this next menu, you're going to choose how you actually want this setup to occur. You can either create a new server or convert an existing LDAP server that's already residing on the Synology NAS. For our environment, we're going to create a new server in this case. And then now to get this finalized in this environment, we're going to need to approve this on the C2 Identity portal. So back under that Edge server menu, we can see that we have our Athena Edge LDAP server pending approval. We can click approve and that'll initialize it and begin its full sync process with this environment. Now, if we drill down into this Edge LDAP server environment, you're going to notice some LDAP information at the very bottom. You'll need some of these bind DN details to actually join additional devices on the Edge network to this Edge LDAP server. So if you need these details for other services like VMware, for example, if you wanted to do some sort of LDAP integration that way, you could use those details listed here. Now, once this is all complete, you can use those different C2 identity users to log into your Synology NAS. So this spot import user, remember we created this user, we're actually going to sign into the Synology NAS with the C2 identity user. You can see we're getting the first time login interaction with DSM or operating system on this NAS. You can see we have the tour options and some different help warnings that come up, and you can see that this user has permissions to some basic features inside of DSM like file station, etc. And you can see as we click on the person icon on the top right that we did sign in with our C2 identity users, showing how easy and simple it is to set up your Edge LDAP server with Synology and also sign in with your global cloud-based identity credentials that you created in C2 Identity. Now, the C2 Identity Agent is going to be what actually integrates your physical devices, your Windows and your macOS devices with C2 Identity. And it supports offline authentication of C2 Identity users on these physical devices. So even if this device is on the go, maybe it's in airplane mode or what have you, those users can still log into their physical devices with their C2 Identity credentials. Now, there's easy deployment with the C2 Identity Agent. You can install manually, you can do mass deployment for Windows using a group policy update, or you could install this via command line commands. You can also inherit user accounts on those physical devices for C2 Identity. So C2 Identity can actually take over already existing Active Directory or other users directly on the device. You can also configure device privileges, and you can specify which C2 Identity users have access to specific devices. This is especially useful if you have a workforce that may not have assigned seating, for example. Maybe they have a different desk every day, or they might do some group work in different spots of the office. Having these device privileges would allow them to float between devices easily while still retaining some control over what they actually have access to. So let's go ahead and check out the C2 Identity Agent and how to get that configured inside of your environment. So to get your Windows and macOS devices integrated into your C2 Identity environment, you're going to need to install the C2 Identity Agent. And to do so, what you're going to do is move to the Manage Devices option on the left-hand pane in your C2 Identity portal and add devices in. You'll be prompted to download a client for Windows or macOS, and make sure you copy over your connect key so you can paste in when you're prompted to do so on those agents. Back on our Windows device, we're going to follow through with the wizard for actually installing this agent. We're going to accept the license agreement, of course, and also paste in the connect key as prompted. And once that's all done, your system is essentially ready to go with C2 Identity. Whenever you do this install, the system will be in a status that you see here, where it's awaiting approval from your C2 Identity environment. So we're going to move back over to C2 Identity, decrypt our data, and approve this device in our C2 Identity environment. And now it's ready to be utilized by your users that have permissions to utilize this device. So to apply those permissions for your users, you're going to click on the device itself, And you can see you have groups that are already allowed to access the system, the default device users, and also there's an individual users list. So you can add in groups or users to access this computer. For us, we're going to add in this spot import user as a general user. As we do so, keep in mind, we did enable two-factor authentication on this spot import user. So we're going to log in with this user through our C2 identity agent on this Windows machine, and it's going to prompt us for our two-factor authentication code, because with the C2 identity agent, it supports two-factor authentication for logging into your Windows environment. Now, since this is a brand new user, we're going to see the initial prompt for Windows, hi, hello, etc., welcome to your first time, all that stuff. So as you can see, by using the C2 identity agent, you can use your cloud-based credentials to have access to your on-premise Windows devices, Mac OS devices, and the like. With the C2 identity agent, you have global single sign-on from these physical devices to your cloud applications that we're about to integrate, to anything else that you have bound to your C2 Identity Edge LDAP server on top of that. Moving on into section 4, how to integrate on-premise and cloud components. So as we work through these different cloud integrations, keep in mind we're essentially configuring C2 Identity as your main identity provider, especially with Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 integrations where user provisioning is supported. C2 Identity will definitely be your identity provider moving forward if you do this operation. So in terms of these cloud integrations with C2 Identity, there's some direct integration options with Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. These are tighter integrations with these cloud platforms that allow you to do things like user provisioning from directly inside of C2 Identity. And you're going to actually integrate with these platforms using your global admin account, for example, for Microsoft 365. Now, even though we don't have those same types of integrations for other cloud platforms, C2 Identity can be integrated with any third-party cloud service that supports SAML 2 and third-party identity providers themselves. So let's check out how we can integrate some of these cloud services with C2 Identity, particularly Microsoft 365. Let's get some cloud applications integrated with C2 Identity so we can provide single sign-on for them. To do so, we're going to move down to the Applications menu on the left-hand pane here, and we're going to add in the applications listed in this menu. So there's some already very popular applications listed right at the very top: Dropbox, Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, or you can search for other services like your chat service maybe, or maybe a CRM you would like to integrate. Now we're going to scroll through this list. As you can see, it's quite extensive. You're probably going to find the cloud service you want to integrate already listed in this menu, but if you don't for whatever reason, keep in mind you can integrate other cloud services with the custom SAML app button at the very top. Keep in mind you're just going to be integrating using some service provider details. That service you're trying to integrate must support the SAML2 protocol, and it also must support third-party identity providers like C2 Identity is. For us today, we're actually going to be integrating with Microsoft 365 with user provisioning. So we're going to sign in with this one, utilizing our global admin credentials for this tenant. Once that's all done, we're going to choose what domain we actually want to map with our C2 Identity users. We're going to choose the synologywebinars.com domain. Keep in mind, on Microsoft.com domains are not supported. Now, once this is all finished, most of the C2 Identity configuration is actually completed at this point. And this menu is actually telling you to issue some PowerShell commands listed here. And once that's done, you'll have single sign-on enabled for Microsoft 365 with C2 Identity. Now that we close this menu, you can see that we have the Microsoft 365 and C2 Identity integration complete. Now we just need to add access to this application for groups or users in C2 Identity. So on the user menu, we can actually add in some of our users we imported or created. So for example, that spot import user, you can see there's an exclamation point on the far right-hand side. That means there isn't a Microsoft 365 account to map to this user yet. But with user provisioning, you can actually provision that account in Microsoft 365 using this menu. And you'll see some other users do already have a mappable, already created Microsoft 365 account. This next warning is just telling you that it's provisioning that spot import user account in Microsoft 365. So we're going to let it continue this process. Now that that's complete, we have provisioned that spot import user into Microsoft 365. So we're going to log in with that user using our C2 Identity credentials. So we're going to log in with the spot import user. We're going to sign in with that account and password, and then we'll be prompted for our two-factor authentication code because we set that up for this user way back in an earlier demo. So as you can see, the integration between C2 Identity and Microsoft 365 is seamless, allowing you to do user provisioning and create a single sign-on environment using the Synology cloud-based identity and access management platform. Moving on to section 5, what I would consider a bonus section on C2 Password for Business. So the reason why I say C2 Password for Business is a bonus in this case is because it's included with your C2 Identity for Business subscription. So that means that you're able to use this automatically if you already subscribe to C2 Identity for Business. It allows you to securely store and access password and login info for your users. So how this all relates back to C2 Identity, the users in this case are all those users you integrated so far with C2 Identity, and you can give them permissions to specific passwords or specific password vaults in your C2 password environment. You can also share these passwords amongst groups of people. So instead of having all of your passwords in an Excel file, for example, you can provide your IT admins and access to your C2 password vault, for example, for just the IT infrastructure. So it gives you a more secure way to share those passwords internally. Now, just like any other password manager, you're able to autofill your logins, so it makes your login process smoother for all the resources that are available inside of C2 Password, all those resources that you have passwords for. So with that all in mind, let's go ahead and check out how C2 Password for Business integrates with C2 Identity. Let's check out C2 Password for Business, the included service with your Identity for Business subscription that we went with today. To get to your C2 Password for Business instance, you're going to click on the icon on the top right on your screen and move to the C2 Password module. It's going to open up a new window, and you're going to decrypt your data for your C2 Password environment. Now, our password environment is going to be essentially blank, so you're not going to see too much data in there because we just created it today. And as prompted, we're going to update this environment like you see on this pop-up. Now, once everything is all updated, we're going to be able to interact with our C2 Password for Business environment for the first time. Now, on this main pop-up here, you're going to see that you have the option to download your Chrome plugins, and on the next page, you also get prompted to download any iOS or Android applications you might need for C2 Password. Now, on this main screen, there's not a lot of data yet, but under Management, that's going to be where you can create vaults and apply user permissions to the vaults. And you can see under Management the list of all the C2 Identity users we've been interacting with thus far. So under Vault, we can go ahead and create a vault and apply this to specific groups or individual users alongside that. So we could apply this vault to our administrators group, for example. And on the next screen, we can apply this vault to any users that might be outside of the groups we selected. Now, once we've selected our users that we want to have access to this vault, they'll have access to any data that is inside of that vault on top of that. So, for example, you can have this vault populated with secure credentials. This is going to be a secure devices vault. So this could be all the shared passwords for your critical infrastructure for IT, for example. This is a much more secure way of doing things because it's permission or role-based based on the groups that you set. It's much more efficient than, let's say, using an Excel spreadsheet with all these shared passwords, because if that spreadsheet ever gets out, then all of those passwords are considered compromised at this point. By using a password manager like C2 Password for Business, you're able to tightly control who has access to what password resources based on their roles and based on their actual user credentials that they use every day. Moving on into our last section today, recap and next steps. We started off taking a look at how you set up C2 Identity for the first time, from creating your domain to applying your encryption key. We then got our users going. We added them manually, did some CSV imports, and also did some syncing with external directories like Microsoft Active Directory, for example, that may have already been on-premise. We then took a look at how you can manage devices, installing the C2 Identity agent on your personal computers, your Windows devices and your macOS devices alike. Finally, we took a look at how you can integrate your cloud components with your on-prem components, with direct integrations with Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, and any other systems that have the ability to use SAML 2 and third-party identity providers. And finally, we took a look at the bonus feature here, C2 Password for Business, which is included with your C2 Identity for Business subscription. So if you need help past what this webinar could provide, then go ahead and check out our Synology product online training page. We have hours and hours of video content there. If you need help past what those webinars can provide too, go ahead and check out our knowledge base. It's a library of step-by-step guides on a range of topics. And lastly, if you have any other questions, go ahead and send us an inquiry, and our highly trained inquiry team can get those questions answered. Now, if you're a business user with your own internal IT team, go ahead and reach out to onboarding@synologyamerica.com, and then we can connect you with some additional resources here internally. And if you're a channel partner reseller, go ahead and reach out to sac_sales@synology.com, and we can get you connected with your technical account manager. And lastly, for our friends across the pond, if you have UK offices or UK clients, go ahead and reach out to our UK_sales team, and we can get you help there too. With that all said, thank you so much for tuning in and learning a little bit more about C2 Identity, and we will see you next time.